Let's jump right into it. So last week we ended up with me making a few claims. Whoops, hang on a second. I just changed all my. Hang on.
No problem.
The let's start again. The Zoom took over my screen, so I can't see my slides anymore. Okay, here we go. Let's try that. So you can still see my slides, right?
Yes,
Can you see the new slide?
I believe I can prove to you.
Yeah, good, good. Okay, let's start back. Uh, let me. Yeah, I clicked on it and suddenly I couldn't see my slides. I could only see the Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom
Zoom's not
is
very
weird.
friendly here. Like it won't show me. Hang on, let's try this one more time. It doesn't show my screen on the Zoom. So if something goes wrong with the Zoom, I can't tell if my screen is showing there, but I still need to see my slide. Okay. No, I don't know if that works. How do I pin the slideshow? Um, okay, well, you tell me if it stops showing.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
well, go back and start from the beginning. Okay, so
sure.
last week I said I made a few claims. I said, I believe I can prove to you it's more rational and logical to believe that God exists using science. And it comes out of this book, Who's Agent X? And that's a talk we're going to do today. So the next thing I'm going to do after that is we're going to talk about proving the New Testament is accurate. And then we'll talk about if Jesus really existed, and we'll prove that using history. And then we'll prove that Jesus really rose from the dead using all the above facts and details. And then we'll talk about why Christ had to die and why God must punish sin. And we'll end the series with how can God exist when there's so much evil in the world. So this is the spread of the things we're going to talk about. Now, what we're talking about is apologetics, and apologetics, we get the word apologetics from the word apologia in 1 Peter 3:15, which says, always be prepared to give an apologia to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. That word apologia does not mean to apologize, it means to defend or explain. So it is an explanation or a defense or an argument of your faith, but always do it with gentleness and respect. And I want you to notice it says, always be prepared. It doesn't say sometimes be prepared. It doesn't say you don't need to be prepared. It doesn't say if you don't like intellectual things, you don't need to worry about it. No, it says always, meaning everybody, all of us have to do that, everyone. Okay, so what is apologetics? Apologetics is the evidence and defense of the rational faith of Christianity using facts, logic, history, science, philosophy, and reasoning. And so today's talk is Who is Agent X? The subtitle of this is proving that it's more reasonable to believe that God exists without using the Bible. We're going to not use the Bible throughout the talk. We'll instead, well, if we refer to the Bible, we'll refer to how the Bible knew what it was talking about, but we'll not use it to prove anything. Okay, before we start, we always have to do a bit of caveat. Sometimes I do this presentation to an atheist, and atheists will say, well, that sounds great, but we just don't know. Well, we just don't know is not a valid alternative theory. Okay, imagine you're in court. The prosecution says the murderer was identified as the defendant. Witnesses said the murderer had blue eyes, dark hair, and a scar. The defendant had a motive, an opportunity, and we found the still smoking gun in his car. Then the defense stands up and says, we can't conclude that the murderer did it, the defendant did it, Your Honor. Maybe aliens did it. We just don't know. Well, that doesn't work, does it? Why? You have to refute the existing data and show why it is not valid or why it's insufficient evidence. You can't complain, we don't know. The case has to be taken in its entirety. Any single point may not be sufficient and may have alternative explanations. For instance, somebody threw the gun in his car, other people have blue eyes, the victim had other enemies. But when you add them all up, blue eyes, scar, motive, opportunity, gun, then the entire case has explanatory power, and any jury in the world would find it reasonable evidence to convict. You can't say we just don't know. I presented you an argument, and I'll talk about how you can refute an argument. Okay, let me ask you this. This is the few times we will, again, we'll refer to the Bible, but we won't use it. If the Bible is true, what is the greatest miracle ever? A lot of people have said the resurrection, but actually, if you think about it, the resurrection is an easy miracle. A lot of people have said turning water into wine. But again, turning water into wine is an easy miracle if this is true. See, if the creation story in Genesis 1 is true, this is the creation of the entire universe, then if this is true, every other miracle in the Bible is plausible and possible and probable. Why? Because then if you can create a universe, you can turn water into wine. If you can create a universe and life and matter and energy and everything, you can bring somebody back to life. Resurrection becomes an easy miracle, right? Okay, next question is, can the supernatural happen? Is there a supernatural? Well, if you don't believe the supernatural can happen, you'll never believe any of the Bible's claims, especially not the resurrection. But after this series, you will not be able to say that there is no supernatural and be scientifically correct. In fact, after today's presentation, you won't be able to do that. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover where did the universe come from? And two, we're going to cover what can we derive about the cause of the universe from science. Now, I did say that I'm going to show you how to refute an argument. Well, there are only two ways to refute an argument. One, you have to prove either the facts are wrong or incomplete, or you have to prove that the logic is wrong. There is no other way to disprove this, right? And the second thing is, we don't need 100% proof. We just want to find the most reasonable answer to this question, okay? Remember, in a case of law, if somebody's a criminal, you don't need to find 100% proof that the person did it. You want most reasonable answer to the question, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And that's what we're looking for. Okay, before I start, I need to introduce something about, I'm going to talk about other universes. And just as a primer, most of the kids understand when I say other universes because they've been watching the Marvel movies. But a lot of adults don't understand when I say other universes. So here's the Earth. The Earth is in the solar system. The solar system is in the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy is in the local group. And the local group is in the local supercluster. And the local supercluster is in the universe. None of these are universes. The universe is that top one. So there are other universes like that top one. What about them? They are, the other universes are not part of our universe. They came into being separately, independently. They don't intersect, interact, or interfere with our universe. They are out there somewhere. Okay? So this, when I talk about the universe, just remember that the universe, those universes are out there. We don't know where they are, and we'll talk about where they are. Okay. There are four major points we're going to cover today. And this talk is kind of technical. You may get lost, but at the end of each of the four major points, I will come up with a conclusion. Even if you don't understand exactly how we got to that conclusion, follow me on the conclusion. You can always come back, watch the video, or do some research, or read my book, and it'll explain how we got there in more detail. But I don't want you to get lost just because you missed a step. Just understand the steps are tied together. Okay, let's start with the universe is not eternal. 80 years ago, atheists said, everything which has a beginning has a cause, and anything that existed forever needs no cause. Let me say that again. Everything which has a beginning has a cause, and anything that existed forever needs no cause. Now, this should be self-evident. Think about it. If something has existed forever, there was no point at which it did not exist. Thus, there is nothing that precedes it. Therefore, nothing could have caused it, because to cause something, you have to precede it causally, not casually, but causally or temporally, or temporally, right? You can't cause something unless you precede it. So that scientists and philosophers agree that anything that existed forever logically needs no cause. Okay, so that was the first point. Everything which has a beginning has a cause. Anything existed forever needs no cause. Two, the universe had no beginning and existed forever. That's what the atheists said. And because the universe had no beginning and existed forever, therefore the atheist said the universe needs no cause. All right? It follows true. If the universe had no beginning, then the universe needs no cause. Now, this was the case till about 80 years ago. Now, at the same time, theists, that's Christians, said everything which has a beginning has a cause, and anything that exists forever needs no cause. This is exactly what the atheists said. We agreed with them. But when it got to number two, we didn't say the universe had no beginning. Why? Because we read Genesis 1 and we said, no, God had no beginning and existed forever. Therefore, what? God needs no cause. Everything with me so far? This, by the way, is called the cosmological argument. Okay, so here's the cosmological argument, and this is what atheists were saying 80 years ago. Until this guy named Hubble showed up. Now, Hubble was not named after the telescope was named after Hubble. Hubble was looking through the Hooker telescope, and he noticed something very interesting. He was looking at all the different galaxies, and he noticed that some galaxies were redder than they should have been. Now, you probably are asking, well, how do we know how red they should have been? Well, they've done a bunch of studies, and they understood from the different composition of the galaxies, they should have a certain color. Well, they noticed that these specific galaxies were redder than they should have been. And then they thought, okay, well, maybe that's just those galaxies. Let's look at other galaxies on other sides. And they noticed that all the galaxies everywhere around were redder than they should have been. In fact, the further away they were, the more red they were. If they were closer to us, they were less red. And Hubble was really puzzled. He was trying to figure out why this was the case. And in fact, he then figured it out. He figured out that he was looking at what? The Doppler shift. Now, what is the Doppler shift? Let's give me an example of the Doppler shift in cars. Let's say a car is coming by, you're standing on the side of the freeway, car starts coming towards you, it's going to sound like this. Now, is the car changing its sound as it passes you? The answer is no. In fact, the sound the car is making is probably the sound that it made when it was right next to you. But when it was coming towards you, each wavefront was closer than the next wavefront. So what would happen is it would sound like it had a shorter frequency. A higher frequency because shorter wavelengths. And so therefore the pitch would go up. But as the car left you and went away from you, each subsequent wavelength would be longer, and so it would have a lower frequency, and so the pitch goes down, and that's why it makes that sound. What Hubble realized that he was seeing the Doppler shift, but not in cars, but in stars. You see, if you have an object that's moving away from you at a very high speed, it's going to have a red shift. And if it was coming towards you, it would have a blue shift. What does that mean? Well, that means that these galaxies are moving away from us at very high speeds. In fact, what's interesting is the further away they are, the faster they're moving away from us. They're like, wow, so everything is moving away from everything else. Well, what does that mean? Well, if it's moving away from it, that means the universe is what? The universe is expanding. But if the universe is expanding, what does that mean? That means if the universe is expanding, it is expanding from something. And if it's expanding from something, it can't be infinitely old, or it would have finished expanding eons ago, and we'd see nothing but fuzzy light out there. Well, they said, well, if it's expanding, we can calculate it, can't we? We know how fast it's expanding. We know it's speeding up as it gets away from the center of the universe. So maybe we can calculate how long it has been expanding and where it came from. And so they started calculating, and they found out that calculations show the universe, light, matter, and everything suddenly came into being with a big bang 13.7 billion years ago. Before the Big Bang, we have the singularity. This is the point at which matter and time start to exist. Well, they were like, wow, this is interesting. And then they started calculating the equations for the starting of the universe. And they realized, well, there's nothing really like space and time. There's only a single thing called space-time. Why? Because you see, it turns out when matter was created, matter can't exist without time. But time can't exist without energy. And energy can't exist without matter. They all need each other. You can't have one without the other. They were all so tightly interwoven that you can't get any single one of those without the other two being in existence. Well, Houston, we have a problem. What's the problem? Well, everything which has a beginning has a cause. Anything that existed forever needs no cause. But when you get to two, the universe had guess what? The universe had a beginning and has not existed forever. What does that mean? Therefore, the new universe needs what? It needs a cause. Now, atheists were taken aback by this at first. In fact, they hated this theory. They called it the Big Bang. The Big Bang Theory, it was called the Big Bang Theory to mock it, right? And they said, oh, no, this is stupid. But then they eventually had to agree with it, and they accepted it. In fact, in the beginning, most scientists who accepted the Big Bang Theory were kicked out of universities or refused tenure or not allowed to enter, right? They were mocked. But over time, as the experiments were done, they realized, hey, we can't get away from the Big Bang. We have to accept it. So atheists said, well, okay, fine. Maybe the universe created itself. Well, Can something create before? Can something do something before it exists? Can it create universe create itself?
No.
Okay, so it says okay. Maybe it can't create itself. But still, so what? They're going to push it back. We grant you that the universe had no beginning, but what gave rise to the universe had no beginning. Sorry, we grant you the universe had a beginning, but what gave rise to the universe had no beginning. They're going to push that back, right? They're going to say hyperspace or some unknown subatomic quantum agent that existed forever without a cause. That created the singularity that caused the Big Bang. That existed forever agent is the unknown object, right? So that agent, that whatever created the universe. So atheists say some agent created the universe. My atheist friends don't like the word God, so we will call this cause Agent X. Agent X caused the universe. So our job today is to be detectives. We're going to put on a detective act, and we're going to find out who is Agent X or what. It could be something. Okay, now all good detectives do this, right? You're a detective. You want to figure out who somebody is. You know, he had a scar on his face. He had green eyes. He had red hair, and he knew the victims. You write all these things down, and then you go, okay, and you keep writing it down until you can eliminate all the other suspects and figure out who this person is. Okay, so we know a couple things about Agent X, don't we? We know that it's powerful enough to create a universe. Created the universe, right? Two, we know it exists forever without cause because it created time, right? Before there was time, Agent X had to be there. It's what we call atemporal causation. So something outside of time created time. So therefore, we know it exists forever without cause. Okay, here's a little bit of math for you. We're going to subtract with infinity. You guys all know this. Infinity minus 1 equal to infinity. Infinity minus 1 billion equal to infinity. Infinity minus infinity, we don't know, it's undefined. Okay, so let's look at dividing with infinity. Infinity divided by 1 equal infinity. Infinity divided by 1 billion still equals infinity. Infinity divided by 1 billion, we don't know, it's undefined, so we don't go there. Okay, so let's now look at the atheist current. They say that there's no evidence that God did this, create a universe. Agent X, they say, could be something mindless, like a quantum fluctuation, right? Okay. Well, if it's mindless with a quantum fluctuation, we really only have two options. What's that? Well, one option is a fluctuation is going to make only one universe and then stop. Or two, the quantum fluctuation is going to make universes on a regular basis, right? Now, it can't do anything else. I mean, by that means it's going to make one universe and then stop, or it's going to make universes on a regular basis. Think about it. Let's say you had a printer that was, something was wrong. It was buggy. And it would print once and then stop, right? Or it would never print, right? Or it would print like something on day 1, and then for 10 days, nothing would happen. And then it would print something on day 10, and then it would print nothing for 2 days, and then it would print. So it just randomly start printing things, right? So these are the two things it can do. It can't do anything else. Why? Because it has no mind. It doesn't have a free will. It's what we call mechanistic, right? So let's look at option 1. Option 1, this is eternity past, somewhere way back there off on screen. Here's the future. This is the causality line. Remember, there's no time. It's just causality. So if something with no free will and no mind, like a mechanistic fluctuation, existed for all infinity outside of time and was going to create one universe, okay? When would it have created that one universe? Now, remember, we're looking at causality and trying to tie into time, so it's very difficult. But if we subtract with infinity, if, let's say, it took billions and billions of attempts and tries to create that one universe, you'd still be what? Infinity minus a billion would be what? Infinity. So that would be eternity ago. So that one universe, if something mechanistic outside of time was going to create a universe, why would it create it 13.7 billion years ago? It would have created it eternity ago, right?
Mm.
Well, the universe is not eternally old, nor is it eternally lasting. And two, William Lane Craig, who's a philosopher, says it can be plausibly argued that the cause of the universe must be a personal creator. For how else could a temporal effect arise from eternal cause? For example, if the cause of waters being frozen is the temperature being below 0, then the temperature were below 0 degrees from eternity, then any water present would be frozen from eternity. So in other words, if you had something that was going to cause something and had no mind, it would have happened in eternity. It would not have happened now. So the only way to have an eternal cause but a temporal effect would seem to be if the cause is a personal agent who freely chooses to create an effect in time. For example, a man sitting from eternity may will to rise, hence a temporal effect may arise from an eternally existing agent. Now, some of you might have thought, well, wait, what about if the universe collapsed and expand and collapsed and expand? Then the original universe would have been eternity ago, but the current universe was one that collapsed and expanded 13.7 billion years ago. Well, if our universe kept collapsing and expanding after each cycle, residual energy would be left over. We would be able to measure it, but we don't see any. So scientific evidence is against this. We'll deal with loop quantum cosmology next, because I know some of you are thinking, well, Neil, what about loop quantum cosmology? I'll get to it. Patience. Okay, so option one, the fluctuation is going to make only one universe and stop. Doesn't work. Let's look at option two. Fluctuation is going to make universes on a regular basis. Well, okay, if we have a universe, this universe causality line, eternity is backward, some off screen. If something with no will, no mind, like a mechanistic quantum fluctuation, existed for all infinity outside of time, was going to create more than one universe. It's just randomly creating. Let's say the first universe takes 1 billion years, second universe takes 10 billion years, third billion takes 100 billion years. It's just randomly creating. One of them takes a day, the other takes a second, right? It's just creating universes. How many universes would we have by now? Dividing by infinity, infinity divided 1 billion years equal what? Is equal to what? Infinite universes.
Yeah.
So, are there infinite universes? Well, the infinite universes covers loop quantum cosmology. It covers atemporal causality. Each of the infinite universes are created at the same non-time 13.5 billion years ago. And I'll go over that a bit further in a few minutes. It covers Bud fractal, spontaneously generated, randomly generated, quantum and sequential universes. It covers diminishingly smaller universes. It covers the universes where every time you make a decision, the universe splits into every possible decision-making option, right? All the multiverses and inverse. But again, it's not, the question is, are there multiple or infinite universes? It's called the multiverse. By the way, a multiverse won't do. We got to have infinite universes because it's been out there for all eternity. Well, are there multiple infinite universes? Yes, in the Marvel comics there is. In the Marvel movies there is. Marvel universe there is. But is it in real life? Well, the sad thing is there's no evidence for this. Because you can't see them, you can't touch them, you can't taste them, you can't smell them, you can't hear them, you can't calculate, can't measure any of the effects of these universes. In Spider-Man Across the Multiverse, they have this device that allows them to transport across the multiverse. But that violates the whole concept of a multiverse. The multiverse is completely different from your universe. There's no way anything physical can get you there, right? So, but here's the problem. If there is no evidence of the multiverse, by the way, enjoy the Marvel movies. I love them a lot. They're great. But let's understand the practicality of physics, right? There's no evidence for this. So, but isn't this the complaint the atheists had about God? That there's no evidence of God, you can't see him, you can't touch him, you can't hear him, you can't calculate him. Why is the sudden change in standards? If you're going to say there's infinite universes, you're saying that you have blind faith in these infinite universes because you can't prove those infinite universes. And our motto here is no blind faith. Therefore, we can show that infinite universes are not real. Besides that, infinite universes are kind of silly, right? If you think about the consequences of infinite universes, there are almost infinite yous out there watching the same presentation with me, and there'll be almost infinite yous over and over and over again, right? There are so many universes out there that every single possibility has occurred. Think about it. You're just there. There's so many copies of you because every time a universe spawns, of all the possibilities, one of those universes, you're going to be born again. Right? You're going to be born, and there's another universe where you're born, but there's also a universe where whenever you toss a coin, it always comes up heads, even if you do it 1 billion times in a row. There's a universe where you're the one giving the presentation to me. All right? Now, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, you don't believe this, because he was an atheist. He said, yes, I believe it. I said, no, you don't. Let me explain why you don't. Let's say we were playing poker. I don't play poker, but just in that universe, we play poker, right? Suddenly you raise, I got 10 royal flushes in a row. And the chances of getting that are astronomical. But it's possible. It's very low, right? But you jump up and shout, you're cheating. And I say, no, not at all. We're just in the one universe where I just always happen to get a royal flush. Now, Mr. Atheist, would you buy that? Would you think it's reasonable? If you don't think that's reasonable, why do you think this is reasonable, that we have infinite universes? But here's the other thing that kills it. It turns out that 3 atheists, Borg, Guth, and Vilenkin, who calculated all the equations, they found out that inflationary spacetimes are not past complete. What does that mean? That means even the infinite inverse doesn't solve your problem, because all the equations prove that none of them, can be past infinite. Meaning that there is a starting point. There might be infinite universes now, but there's still a starting point for the universes, right? There's still that primary universe that had to begin, and that universe hasn't had a time when it began. It's not infinite. So you can't get around this problem. So what does that mean? Well, if the option 1 is not there, option 2 is not there, then what do you mean? That means the first cause must be non-mechanistic. The first cause must have a free will. Okay, now, here's what you have to understand. Mechanistic things like gravity, physics, and chemistry do the same thing over and over again. They can't decide to suddenly do something different, right? If there's mechanistic, if we have a ball and a swing, it's going to do the same thing. So Neil deGrasse Tyson is an atheistic scientist, although I think now he's kind of changed his view, who often passively aggressively mocks Christianity. In this video, he explains why you can trust something mechanistic like the laws of science, right, to do the same thing over and over again. He releases a heavy ball on a chain, and he knows that it won't swing far back enough to hit him. So he doesn't flinch when it swings back, because he knows that ball is going to respect the laws of gravity and inertia, and it's not going to have enough energy to come back to the same spot. Energy is going to be wasted. But remember, things are different if there's a non-mechanistic free will agent on the other side. Mechanistic things do the same thing, and you can tell what they're going to do. Free will agents can do something completely different. So here's somebody on the other side of the ball doing something completely different.
So why didn't I flinch? Because the laws of science differ fundamentally from those of...
Ooh.
Now, of course, it's been doctor edited, but the point is that, look, you can't get free will, you can't predict what a free will agent's going to do. Here it is again, because I love watching it.
So why didn't I flinch? Because the laws of science differ fundamentally from those of...
Okay, so now we're stuck on it. So we know 3 things about Agent X, right? The third thing we know about Agent X is what? It's a non-mechanistic agent. Now, a lot of the people now at this point are going, wait. Does the Big Bang contradict Genesis? Because Genesis says 6 days. Does the Big Bang contradict it? Well, let's look at what Nobel physics winners say. Now, these guys, I'm going to quote 3 atheists who have Nobel Prizes in cosmology, in physics, and astronomy, right? So here's what Arno Penzias says. The best data we have concerning the Big Bang are exactly what I would have predicted. I had nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. Rob Wilson, atheist also, so certainly there was something that set it all up. I can't think of a better theory of the origin of the universe to match Genesis. George Smoot about the Big Bang. There is no doubt that a parallel exists between the Big Bang as an event and the Christian notion of creation from nothing. The Big Bang validates Genesis even to the atheists. And that's very powerful. And that's why when you want to argue about God existing, don't use the Bible, because they don't accept the Bible. You use what? You use science and use the Big Bang. Now, here's some notes, because does it contradict Genesis, right? Well, the Big Bang is not a good name. The big controlled explosion would be more accurate. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to explain that to you. Okay, the Big Bang theory only covers the creation of the universe. It does not cover the Earth or the solar system. The sun and moon showing up on day 4 can actually fit well with the Big Bang. There's a good explanation for that. I don't go into it here, but I have an article on it somewhere. Okay, remember, the Big Bang is not equal to evolution. The Bible describes something identical to the Big Bang, but the Bible does not say evolution happened. They're 2 separate issues. The theory of evolution is dying. It's in crisis today. The Big Bang is not going anywhere despite its aims to the contrary. So remember, Big Bang does not equal to evolution. All right, here's the other thing. The Big Bang was derived rationally using just mathematics and physics by a believer, a Catholic monk. He's the guy who came up with the Big Bang just using mathematics and physics, and then it was verified by experimentation. The atheists hated and tried to kill the theory. It was mocked by an atheist and named the Big Bang. They fought in the university so they cannot deny it scientifically. Call it whatever you like. I like the name the Genesis Bang, but it's the greatest scientific proof of God as we see. It is the strongest weapon against bad science and evolution, as you will see today. Okay, so remember when you're witnessing to an atheist, time dilation could explain the 13.7 billion years. So don't argue about that. Let me explain time dilation for you. Okay, so if you know time dilation, the faster you move, the slower time passes for you. So if you're talking about the speed, if you're talking about time from the center of the universe, then it's going to move very slowly. But if you're talking about time from the edge of the moon, so if the narrative of Genesis is talking about it at the edge of the universe, then the time dilation, the outer edge is expanding close to the speed of light. Time slows down for you when you travel the speed of light, God's view, relative to someone not moving at the center, man's view. And if you calculate the time dilation calculator, if you use the speed of light being 99999 and so on to 3, you will see that's about 13.8 billion years. Okay, is that the answer? We don't know. But don't get hung up on it, because don't get hung up on the 6 days for the 6 eons. That's an infamy argument. Genesis 1:11 is literal, not mythological. A lot of people say, oh, if you don't take Genesis 1 as literal, then you're not a Christian. Well, it is literal. It's not mythological. But the day-age argument does not need it to be non-literal. The day-age argument is, how do you literally translate yom in Hebrew? Do you translate it as day or age? It could be either. It could be, there's so many ways to explain it. This is not a hill an atheist should go to hell on, right? So if you're witnessing to an atheist, don't get involved in the 6 days, 13.7 billion years, or 13.8 billion years. It's not worth your time, okay? Because they're going to get hung up on that. You should use the Big Bang to prove that God exists. So, second, don't get stuck trying to disprove evolution. Yes, it's false, but it's way too much work. I used to study evolution all the time. I used to argue with atheists about evolution all the time. But then every week there'd be a new paper with some new evolutionary theory, and I'd have to study that all the way from the beginning. And I didn't even have a degree in biology. So it became such a pain. I'm like, I can't keep up with this. So who cares about evolution? Let me prove God exists. It's a lot easier, right? So next, don't start proving the Bible is accurate. That's the next step. If there is no God, who cares what the Bible says, right? So if you go to the atheist and try to prove the Bible is accurate first, he'll be like, no, there's no God, I don't care, right? Prove that God exists first and let it ruminate. Then you can move to if the Bible is true. Because now you've kind of put the doubts in his mind, right? Okay. So you first want to prove that God exists. And then it's easy enough to use the data the atheists already accept to do that. Okay. Now, when you get to college and your theology professor and every other professor says the earth is 4.3 billion years old, don't start thinking the Bible is unscientific or made up and become an atheist. This is very important, okay? Why? Because there are other valid alternative explanations. Your faith should not rise and die because some geology professor showed you the earth was 4.3 billion days, right? Years old. Next, don't be afraid of science. Science is the study of God's design. Science is using reason, logic, experimentation to explain God's creation. Science was discovered, invented, and originally dominated by Christians, originally monks. Science is the study of God's material universe. We are constantly learning new things. We can occasionally misunderstand the data, but we get a better understanding of the universe with science. It may just take us a while. Okay, science can be purposely set on the wrong track by non-Christians, like evolution. Evolution is not true, and we've been able to disprove a lot of it. But a lot of scientists say, oh, evolution. Well, they're not experts in it, and the people who are experts in it are on the wrong track and off in many cases. Okay, remember, science is never based on consensus. It's only based on evolution and rational conclusions, because there's so many times when the consensus was for one thing and science proved the opposite. I'll give you an example. Science said the reason you got diseases is because of the night airs. And then Louis Pasteur had to prove that there was something called a bacteria. Science said, oh, there's nothing that we can't see. And then again, Pasteur had to prove there was something called a bacteria, right? So over and over again, Christians, and Louis Pasteur was a Christian, by the way. Okay, that means the more Christians there are in the sciences, the more it will stay on track to find the truth about God's design. So you want to be a scientist if you can, if you're interested. Number 4, you can't do science without God, because for science to work, it needs reason, logic, stability, and truth. None of these can exist without God. And let me show you proof of that, right? Here's atheistic biologist J.B.S. Holden. He says, if my mental processes are determined wholly by the motions of atom in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true. And hence I have no reason to supposing my brain to be composed of atoms. Do you see that? I mean, if there's no basis, if atoms randomly moving around, why would you believe atoms randomly moving about, right?
Yeah.
And then even Darwin said that. But then with me, the hard doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind? In other words, Darwin is basically saying, if we evolved from a common ancestor of monkeys, from an ape, why would I trust the convictions of that mind? I don't trust the convictions of a monkey's mind. My friend Frank Turek, who I'm actually doing a lot of work for these days, deals with it in his book, The Stealing from God. Here's what he says. Einstein said the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. We'll talk about this in a bit. Physicist and mathematician Eugene Wigner wrote the famous article in 1960 called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences. He was asking the questions, why can the physical world be so described so well mathematically? He offered no firm answer. Einstein and Wigner were pondering these questions because they were foundational to math and science, which cannot be done without an orderly world and orderly minds. Laws only come from lawgivers. That's what all experience shows us. Why think the laws of nature and the laws of logic are exceptions? If you follow the evidence where it leads, it takes us right back to the same eternal mind that created the universe. The same is true about the reliability of our minds and our ability to discover truth, right? If there is no lawful, orderly world, then nothing makes sense. If this universe is the result of a cosmic accident, as atheists assert, then why isn't everything chaotic? Why is reason so orderly? Why can we think, do science and mathematics, and arrive at conclusions about the orderly external world? Francis Crick, who was the co-discoverer of DNA, was an atheist, said, the astonishing hypothesis is that you, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules, right? Frank Turek quotes him, and then he says this, if naturalism is true, Crick is right, but he doesn't see the problem Haldane saw. Perhaps Crick would have seen that problem if he'd applied his own hypothesis to his own work. Imagine if Dr. Crick had written this. The astonishing hypothesis that my scientific conclusions that I write in this book are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and the associated molecules. If that's the case, would we have any reason to believe anything he says in the book? Non-rational molecules predetermine everything he thinks and writes. If Crick is correct, we're not free creatures. We're just molecular machines. We're not really reasoning, we're merely reacting, which means Crick has no justification to say what he says, and we have no justification to believe what he says is true. It would seem that philosophically materialism refutes itself. You see, if everything is based on a house of randomness, why believe anything random? It makes no sense.
Mhm.
C.S. Lewis said, supposing there was no intelligence behind the universe, no creative mind, in that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. It is merely that when the atoms inside my skull happen for physical or chemical reasons to arrange themselves in a certain way, this gives me, as a byproduct, the sensation I call thought. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? It's like upsetting a milk jug randomly and hoping that the way it splashes itself will give you a map of London. But if I can't trust my own thinking because it's random, of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism. And therefore I have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I cannot believe in thought, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. You can't trust thinking without God. You can't trust science without thinking. That means you can't do science without God.
Wow.
Okay, let's go to the second point. The second point is the universe is fine-tuned. Now, let me explain this. The Big Bang is so fine-tuned that even slight variations would cause instability or collapse or destroy the universe or not allow life. So let me give you an example. It turns out that when the Big Bang occurred, the ratio of protons to electrons, the electrons to protons, are so fine-tuned that if they had changed by 1 in 10 to the minus 37, no stars or planets would have formed. So in other words, it was less by 1 in 10 to the minus 37 or greater than by 1 in minus 37, no planets or stars would form. So let me give you what that really means, right? Because that's a huge number. Okay, so here's the example. Imagine using a recipe that used 286 billion pounds of sugar. That's equivalent to all the grains of sand on 100 million Earths. It was so sensitive that if you added 1 more grain of sugar than the exact amount, the whole cake would fall flat or explode or kill anyone who ate it, right? That's 1 grain of sand, more grain of sugar / sand, that exact amount, and it would destroy the cake. Well, that's what we have with this first statistic. The second one, the ratio of electromagnetic force to gravity, had it changed in 1 to 10 to the minus 40, the stars would burn up too fast and you'd have no heavy elements. And that is the equivalent of 1 grain of sand different in 100 billion Earths. Expansion rate of the universe. No galaxies would form if it had changed in 1 grain of sand in 10 trillion Earths. Mass of the universe, stars would burn too rapidly for life. There would be insufficient helium. There'd be no heavy elements. That would be the difference of 10 to the minus 59. That'd be 1 grain of sand in 100,000 trillion Earths. Think about that. So what does that mean? That means Agent X also is what? Knowledgeable enough to create a fine-tuned universe, a universe that works. Now I want to go back to this slide. Remember this slide? Because one question somebody could say is, look, what if what if there's no time in the example? So how can you consider eternity? Okay, so in reality, we have to assume the entire past and present are simultaneous. Okay, so let's do that. In light of the fine-tuning, we only have 2 options again. Mechanistic process makes only 1 universe. Well, how likely are you going to get this one fine-tuned universe? It's impossible odds, just randomly, impossible. Okay, mechanistic process makes infinite universes. Then you can get this fine-tuned universe. But then you're back to the infiniverse conundrum. You've got thousands and billions and infinite numbers of you running around doing all these things. Infinite numbers of you actually giving the presentation, right? It's just unbelievable. Okay, so let's look at number 3. Point number 3: the Earth seems to be in a very special location that seems to allow scientific discovery. Like, what does that mean? Okay, well, that's not the Earth, but everything seems to be. Let's look at the equations, for instance. The equations that define the universe reduce to simple, humanly comprehensible equations. There's no natural requirement for this to be so, right? For instance, the most important equation for all physicists is E = mc squared. Well, that's a very simple, elegant equation. And by looking at equations like this, we know that we are getting to the closer to the right answer, because scientists have realized, physicists have realized, that every time they get a complex equation, it probably isn't the right answer. There's probably more to it. Let me give an example. So E = mc squared really comes from this, which is Einstein's theory of relativity, right? And also from that, we can derive Maxwell's equation. I used to be able to derive Maxwell's equations in 15 minutes. When I was in college, I can't do that anymore, although I probably could if I went back and studied it again. But Maxwell's equations is very elegant. You look at it here, but it actually works out to be a wonderful, a beautifully arranged matrix. It's a symmetric matrix. Very interesting when you put it in a symmetry, okay? Well, that tells us something. That tells us that we're on the right track with Maxwell's equations. So that's number 1. The equations are very simple and elegant. 2, we have a transparent atmosphere. Well, why is that important? Well, many planets have either no atmosphere or an opaque atmosphere, like Saturn or Jupiter. There's no requirement for life to have a transparent atmosphere, but there is a requirement for life to have a radiation protective atmosphere. And Earth has both a radiation protective atmosphere and a transparent atmosphere. Why? Why is this important? Because if you didn't have that, the early scientists, amateurs, would not be able to study cosmology. Think about that. If we didn't have, if we had cloud cover all the time, we would never be able to study cosmology. Okay, here's the other one. Our location in the spiral arm. You are here, right? We are in a very special place in the spiral arm. If we were out here in the middle of the dark, we would die of radiation. If we're too close to the middle, we'd die of radiation. But we could be in a number of places around one of the arms. Well, let's look at this. If we're too low, too deep, or too close to the interior arms, we'd never be able to see past our own galaxy to discover the Big Bang. Let me explain that. This is our closest nebula, sharpest 2216. What if we were, and this is Tarantula Nebula. What if we were as close to Tarantula Nebula as we are to sharpest 2216? So tonight, if you go out and you look at, if you're in the right place to look at sharpest 216, the closest nebula, that's what it would look like in the night sky. Let's say tomorrow you go out there and Tarantula, and you are as close to Tarantula as you are now to sharpless. What would happen? Well, you would see this. It would be so bright that it would be shadows at midnight. And because of that, we'd never be able to see past to the receding galaxies. We'd never be able to find the Doppler shifts in stars. We'd never be able to discover the Big Bang as a result of that. Somebody wanted us to discover it. Okay, well, who's the silly patent clerk from Switzerland? Who's a good patent? Does anyone know of a patent clerk from Switzerland? Very famous guy. Well, he came up with this idea. He came up with a theory. He says, I have a theory. I'm just a patent clerk, but I have a theory. My theory is that light will curve around heavy objects, and that will prove that my theory is true. So they said, well, light, okay, what kind, we've done tests with light and heavy objects, nothing else. No, you need a very heavy object. How heavy? Well, you need something as heavy as the sun. Oh, really? Okay, wow, okay, well, how do you want to do this test? Well, if you have a star that's behind the sun, if that star looks like it is to the left of the sun or the right of the sun, then you will know that gravity made that light curve around the sun. Okay, well, that sounds good, but you got a problem. What's the problem? Well, the sun is too bright. You're not going to see that star. Oh, well, you got to cover the sun. But if you cover the sun, you got to cover it with something outside the atmosphere, because inside the atmosphere, it'll reflect and you won't be able to see. You got to put something outside the atmosphere to cover the sun perfectly. But you need just the right size object, right? If it's too big, you only see black because you'll cover the star as well. And the star has to be right close to it. If it's too small, then you don't cover the sun and you see the sun. It's too bright to see anything else. If it's too far away, and then our calculations are imprecise. You know, if something is like closer to the sun, then our calculation will be too imprecise. We need something that's exactly the right size that will cover the sun. Well, what do we have? Well, we do have something, right? What is it? It's called the moon. You see, we have a moon that's exactly the right ratios. And the moon is 400 times smaller and 400 times closer than the sun. It's the perfect, when you see the full moon, you go, wow, it's as big as the sun. Yes, it is. It always is as big as the sun. Why? Because it's 400 times smaller and 400 times closer than the sun. It is a perfect size to cover the sun. It's not too big that it covers the star around it. It's not too small that it doesn't cover the sun enough. It's the perfect size. Now, here's what's interesting. Well, of all our studies of all the galaxies, we have never found a star and its moon, a planet and its star have a moon exactly the right size to cover that star. You can only do this experiment on Earth that we know of, nowhere else. And that made the patent clerk, Albert Einstein, famous overnight. Overnight, he became he became one of the most famous scientists in the world. Right? Now, somebody might say, wait, couldn't you verify the theory of relativity some other way? Yes. But when you add it to the transparent atmosphere, the location of the spiral arm, the fact that the moving away from the Earth, in fact, we can't do, in a few 100,000 years, we may not be able to do this experiment because the moon would be too far away. We're finding guns and motives and blue eyes suddenly all over the place. So number 4 is Agent X wants us to discover him using science. Okay, let's do the last point. And the last point is that there are dimensions. Okay. For brief moments after the Big Bang, there were 10 dimensions, if not more. These disappeared to our senses after 10 to the minus 23 seconds. Right? Brief instant of time, there were 10 dimensions, but we can't measure them anymore. Well, what are those 10 dimensions? Well, the height, length, and width. What's the 4th dimension? Well, the 4th dimension is a dimension of time. It's only half a dimension because you can only travel in one direction. But at the Big Bang, there was also a 4th spatial dimension, like height, width, and length, and 5 other spatial dimensions. And you go, whoa, what? Okay, I want you to think about this. I'm going to show you a short video that explains what it would be like if you were a 3-dimensional being interacting with a 2-dimensional being. Let me know the video, you can hear the sound.
Yeah, we hear.
Welcome to Flatland, a world of only two dimensions. Only forwards and backwards, left and right. In this world, there is no up and no down.
I said to Ray, where's Dottie? He said, well, she's out in line. I said, huh?
Where's that from? What the bleep is that thing? Huh?
In this world, the two-dimensional beings that live here have no concept of three-dimensional objects. These two-dimensional flatlanders have no understanding of cubes, spheres, tetrahedrons, or yours truly. From their 2D perspective, my 3D finger looks something like this.
What the letter does that?
Hello, little circle. Fear of the unknown. Or should I say, not yet known. It's a puzzle. If we see only what we know, how does anyone ever see anything new? The unknown. How do we ever get out of our box? Hello, little circle. Don't be afraid.
Who said that? Where are you?
This is always the tricky part to explain. I'm in another dimension, another space. I am above you.
No, never use that word.
What word?
The A word.
Above?
It's forbidden.
Well, what do you think it means?
I don't know, and I don't want to know. You can be severely punished if you use that word. Are you a ghost?
I hope not. I just have a different perspective than you do. I can see things in a way you can't yet.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, okay, you have a safe hidden in your pantry. And inside it, you have 12 coins, a will, and a passport.
How did you know that? What are you? Are you a god?
Well, no. You see, since I am above you, in the third dimension, I can see inside things in your world.
Third dimension? You are a crazy ghost. There's only two. Look.
So, if I were to touch the inside of your stomach, how would I do that?
Well, you'd have to cut through my skin. Otherwise, it's impossible. Stop! Stop! No.
Ready for more?
More what?
Dimensions.
Oh.
Directions.
No. Yes, but there aren't any. More? More? What will happen to me? What will I become?
You'd have to become it to know.
Okay.
Excellent.
I never knew.
Isn't it funny? That which we are most afraid of is what thrills us the most.
Okay, so now you have an understanding what a two-dimensional being sees when it interacts with a three-dimensional being. So we're going to talk about what a four-dimensional being sees when it interacts with a three-dimensional being, or actually the other way around, what a three-dimensional being sees when it interacts with a four-dimension. So at the point of the Big Bang, there were up to 6 other dimensions, 10 dimensions totally. But we don't know where they are. You're like, where are those dimensions? We don't know. But we can start to imagine what those dimensions were like. Okay, so here is a cube, right? And you guys can see the cube, but a two-dimensional creature would never understand what the cube is. But we could unfold that cube to get this, and then we would see this, right? So a two-dimensional being that's lived on this paper would kind of walk around this cube and say, oh yeah, I can see the square around it. By the way, can you guys see my mouse? I don't think you can see my mouse, can you?
No, we cannot see your mouse.
I wasn't sure. Okay, so let me see if I can actually bring up the mouse. No. Okay. So so now I want to ask you, what does a four-dimensional cube look like? Right? You know what the three-dimensional cube looks like, but what does a four-dimensional cube look like? And we can figure it out. Okay, so a square, at the top of it, we have the square, right? The square is, well, actually, let me see something. Hang on. Can you see my pointer now?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. So if you, except now I can't switch slides. That's interesting. Okay, here we go. So we have a square here, right? A square has 4 sides, right? Each side is a line. Okay, so a square is two-dimensional, it's 4 sides, each side line. A cube, on the other hand, has what? It's three-dimensional. It has 6 sides, and each side is a square. Okay, so now if there was a 4-dimensional cube, so a cube is a 3-dimensional square, right? And if there was a 4-dimensional cube, we call it a tesseract or a hypercube. Many of you might have heard of that, right? So if I have a hypercube, right, it's 4 dimensions. How many sides does a hypercube have? We have 4, 6, so naturally it would make sense. It would have what? 8 sides, right? So now, if the square has 4 lines, the cube has 6 squares, what does a hypercube have? Well, it would have to have cubes, right? So it would have to have 8 cubes. You go, okay, well, that doesn't make, yeah, but how does it fit together? Well, we don't know because we're 3-dimensional beings. We can only imagine in 3 spatial dimensions. Being in 4 dimensions, we'll be able to figure out how a hypercube would work. Well, but what we can do, just like this cube, right? We broke up this cube into 2 dimensions. Let's say we take a hypercube and we break it up into 4 dimensions. What would it look like? You guys ready for this? What would a hypercube look like if we unfolded it just like the 3-dimensional being unfolded a cube into 2 dimensions? It would look like, ready? It would look like this. You go, oh, okay, that makes sense. But wait, are those all cubes? Yes. Well, how does it fold back up? We have no idea. We can't even imagine that. Okay, now, but there might be some way for us to envision this, right? So let's look at this. Now, if you look at this, these 2 sides are actually the same size. But because of the way we've drawn them, right, the perspective, we can say, oh, those 2 are the same size. Now, what about if we rotate the cube? We should see the same size. So if I rotate the cube, oh, look, that's the same size, that's the same size, there's a square, there's a square. We can see all these squares as we rotate the cube around. Okay, so what if we had a hypercube and we rotated a hypercube into our space? Well, every time we rotate it, we should see a cube, right? Just like we're seeing the sides of this cube, we should see a cube, which would be the sides of that hypercube. Well, what would that look like? Well, we don't know exactly, but we can imagine it by just looking at the shadow of the cube in our dimension. Why shadow? Because this is a 3-dimensional cube drawn in a 2-dimensional space. And if you were to take a cube and you actually just draw the shadow of it, they would look like this. So we're going to draw the shadow of a hypercube into 2-dimensional space. And that's what it looks like. There's a cube. There's a cube. There's
Oh,
a cube. But how does it all go up together? We have no idea. We have no idea, right? But it's there. Okay. Now, I want to imagine, keep going on this. Like, okay, so here's a circle. It's a two-dimensional circle, and I have a one-dimensional plane, right? That's a line. Now, as the circle hits the plane, you'll get a dot, and it grows to the full width of that, the diameter of the circle, and then it's a full line, and then it drops back down. So this is what a one-dimensional creature would see if a two-dimensional circle was dropped into it. Now, if I take a three-dimensional sphere and I pass it through a two-dimensional, so if that being had in the picture, by the way, in the video, the being, well, I'll explain it later. But anyway, so if I take a ball and I pass it through a table or a piece of paper, you will see it. First, you'll just see a dot, right? And then it would grow until it was the full size of the diameter of the ball. And then it would continue disappearing until it, and the circle gets smaller until it disappeared, right? So this is kind of what, here's a picture of that, a simulation of that, right? So you see that it touches the table, and then you get a dot, and then it grows and it grows and grows until the full size, and it shrinks back down. And the whole time, if you were two-dimensional, you just see that circle, right?
right.
Now, what if I had a four-dimensional ball? A four-dimensional ball is called a hypersphere, right? It has 4 dimensions. What if I brought that four-dimensional ball into our three-dimensional plane? What would I see? Okay, so on the left, I'm going to show you the three-dimensional ball, which you just saw, interesting, two-dimensional plane. On the right, I'm going to show you what a four-dimensional ball would look like when it intersected our plane. Ready? There it goes. So see how on the left you see the circle? On the right, instead of seeing a circle, you actually see a full cube because it's a hypercube. So when it intersects our plane, it shows up as a cube. It shows up as a small cube, and it grows to a big cube, which is the full size of the hypercube in three-dimensional space, and then it shrinks back down. And that's what we see. Now, here's what's interesting about that. If that hypercube was brought into our space, it would look like it was floating. Because there's nothing below it, there's nothing above it, there's nothing behind it, there's nothing on the side. It's floating in midair.
Right.
Now, I want you to think about it. What if there was a being that was four-dimensional and it intersected our plane? So here's our plane, it intersects our plane. We'd see some sort of weird things, shape, and then it would look like, and finally it settles down into something, and it would look like as much of it is in 3 dimensions. Let's say it was a being that looked like a man in 3 dimensions. As it intersects our plane, it would look weird, and suddenly it would settle down to a 3-dimensional man. And then the whole time it would look like it was flying. And then it would disappear from our plane again. It would look really weird as it disappeared out of our plane. Imagine I had a fat piece of paper. Just to give you an example, I had a fat piece of paper and I intersected this plane. I would go into the plane. As I touched the plane, the being here would think I was just a dot. And then it would think I was, if I did this, it would think I was 3 dots. Oh, and then 3 circles. And then, oh, wait, the circles merge into one oval shaped thing. Oh, wait, there's a 5th one there. And it would never figure out unless I did half of this. And then we go, oh, well, I can see something there. I can see what that being is. Of course, it's only looking for one side. That is what it would look like through a 2-dimensional being if I intersected their plane. But if a 4-dimensional being intersected the plane, we would then get the same idea, but in 3 dimensions. And the whole time it would look like they were flying. What does that all mean? Well, here's what it means. Now, I want you to think about this. What is a wall to a 2-dimensional being? Now, remember, in the picture, the wall was just a line. But the 3-dimensional being could hop over the wall, could just step over the wall.
Yeah.
It didn't want to stop it from getting into it. So what is a wall, a 3-dimensional wall, to a 4-dimensional being? Just like the 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional being can hop over a 2-dimensional wall, a room for a 4-dimensional being would be something he could step over. Now let me ask you this. How did Jesus get into the upper room when all the doors are locked? He stepped into the room because what? He was a multidimensional being. His new body was a multidimensional being. But what else does this explain? This explains angels and demons. Angels and demons intersect our plane and disappear from them. And as they're coming, we're like, oh my, oh, they look weird, right? And what's the first thing that angels say to people? Do not be afraid.
Right.
Why? Because they're going through all these convolutions. They look terrifying. And I bet they're big and monstrous too, right? They're powerful beings. So that's another reason. But they are intersecting our plane. And this tells us that angels and demons could exist in other dimensions and intersect our plane at any time. I've just explained scientifically the cause for angels and demons. I've explained scientifically how Jesus gets into the open room. And in a sense, I can explain heaven and hell. Where's heaven and hell? Below us and above us? No, other dimensions. And if you think about it, when that two-dimensional being was pulled out above, they don't have a word for above, right? It looks like above. But a two-dimensional being, seeing that person, this is where might say, we don't have a word for above. Maybe they went to the left. So in the same way, a four-dimensional being might say, we don't have a word for above. We don't have a word for that fourth dimension. Maybe they went up, and we would use the word up.
Mm.
And finally, well, not finally, but the next point is you don't have a soul. You go, what? No, none of you have souls. Like, wait a minute, I thought we were Christians. No, you don't have souls. Here's the difference. You don't have a soul. You are a soul. What you have is a body. At that, you are a soul. What you have is a body. This three-dimensional body is not you. It's part of your soul. It's merged to your soul. But when this dies, your soul does not die. It's a multidimensional entity.
Mm.
Right? And so when you get a new body like Jesus did, you will get a new resurrected body that is multidimensional. And so what that brings us to, what is it like to die? Well, think about it. You are now, let's say you haven't had dinner, or you just had dinner, right? And you had dinner and you enjoyed that dinner in three-dimensional taste buds. Imagine having that dinner with 10-dimensional taste buds. You listen to music. You enjoy that music with three-dimensional ears. Imagine 10-dimensional music. Right? In fact, a lot of people who have near-death experiences say, oh, wow, the music, the sounds are amazing. Well, what about the colors? Right now, you only have three-dimensional colors. Imagine 10-dimensional colors. What's it like to die? Well, if you're going to the right place, if you're saved, that's a pretty amazing experience. Okay. But how is this in the Bible? Let's look at this. 2 Kings 6, then the king of Aram sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early, the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh no, my lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. What had he just done? He had opened Elisha's servant's eyes so he could see into the fourth dimension, fifth, sixth, seventh, whatever dimension there is. The Bible says, who can hide in secret places so I cannot see them, declares the Lord. Did I not fill the heaven and earth? Those are the secret places. God did this so they would seek him, perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. Look, if you're a two-dimensional being, I as a three-dimensional being can be, let's say you have a friend that's right next to you, another circle right next to you. I can be closer to you than that other person. Why? Because I can just be right there. In fact, I can be inside you and you won't even know it because you don't have any sensations in that third dimension. And I go, great, this is all great, Neil. You just proved the supernatural is real. Because what are the natural dimensions? Height, width, length, and time. Those are the four natural dimensions. So what are the other dimensions? They are the supernatural dimensions. I just explained the supernatural. We go, wait a minute, Neil. You just explained the supernatural, but that's all science fiction. No, it's not. We just built the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. What was its purpose? The purpose of the Large Hadron Collider was to send a what? A particle into another dimension.
Oh.
No, this is real. In fact, we're building a bigger one now. Okay. I just thought I'd throw this in. This is done by Salvador Dali. Look, in 1954. Notice the hypercube right there in the background. What was Salvador? I never liked Salvador Dali until I did this research. Found this. I was looking for pictures of hypercube. Found this up and read his explanation. His explanation is Christ died for all men in all dimensions. Fascinating, isn't it? Okay, why is this important? Because this means that Agent X must be outside of time and space and outside of the universe. Why? Because prior to the singularity, time and space do not exist, nor these the other dimensions. So whatever causes singularity did so outside and previous to time and space in any dimension existing. It's not multidimensional, but extra-dimensional. So God is not inside the dimensions, he's outside the dimension. So notice the guy flying around in that video, that would not be God. You know, the three-dimensional, two-dimensional thing. At the most, that would represent an angel, right? Because God is outside all the dimensions. Okay, so remember the beginning of the universe. There is nothing really like space and time, just a single thing called space-time. You can't have one without the other. So what can we say about the agent X who caused the universe? Agent X is not made of matter, does not need energy, right? Because he created energy, does not need energy. Is not constrained by time. So Agent X is not material or physical. And isn't that what the Bible says? Right? Okay, let's wrap this up. The last thing we know is that Agent X is not constrained by time and space, called time and space. So we start with these 4 points. The universe is not eternal. It's fine-tuned. It seems designed for discovery, and there are dimensions, right? So I've reordered them here, and we have powerful enough to create a universe. If something is powerful enough, is the all-powerful, what do we call that? We call that omnipotent. If something is not constrained by time and space because it caused time and space, that is outside of time and space. Now remember, a two-dimensional creature cannot hide from a three-dimensional creature because there's nothing to hide behind, right? Remember the three-dimensional creature could see inside the two-dimensional creature? Well, you can't hide from a three-dimensional creature. A three-dimensional creature cannot hide from a four-dimensional creature. A four-dimensional creature cannot hide from a five-dimensional creature. A dimensional creature cannot hide from a extra-dimensional creature like God. So God is what? He is omnipresent in time and space. He's everywhere all the time. Okay, sorry, not the Agent X. Okay, Agent X is knowledgeable enough to create a fine-tuned universe. We call that omniscient, right? It knows everything about the universe. Wants us to discover him using science. We call that personal. Exists forever without cause, eternal, uncreated, non-mechanistic agent, has free will and a mind. So if you put those all together, remember that the atheist was saying this was some subatomic quantum fluctuation, right? Well, eternal, uncreated, has free will, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, personal. I don't know about you, but this does not sound like a subatomic quantum fluctuation. This is what I would personally define as God. Now, did I use the Bible to prove any of that? Or did I just prove the Bible knew what it was saying all along? Thank you. Questions?
That's amazing. Well, it's definitely a science class and math class altogether. It's a good reminder. I have not been in school for many years, so it's a good reminder.
By the way, so I presented that to a lot of atheists, and they argue on the periphery. They can never refute the best they've ever said is, oh, well, there must be infinite universes. Or they say, well, we don't know. I'm like, that's why I put that in. Of course we know. I just gave you an example. You got to refute my argument. Tell me why it's wrong. And they can't.
Yeah. Well, is anyone want to asking question? It's your time. It's an open Q&A time.
Stunned silence.
I guess people are too like, how we get here? Truly, we as an Asian, we really more busy, not Asian. I shouldn't say present all of Asian. I say, truly, we all really busy our work and political things.
Yeah.
And
Which is important. Those are all important, especially the political stuff, right?
yeah,
Right.
but this is really fundamental that we tend to forget.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect good example to prove people God exists.
And what's interesting about this argument is it shows that if you don't believe God exists, you're supernatural, you reject the Big Bang Theory, you are you're holding on to things like infinite universes, which there's no evidence, so you have blind faith. And so
Yeah.
it turns tables around for Christians to now say, well, you're the one who's superstitious, not me. I just gave you a good example of why it's not. It's scientific.
Right. Yeah, I guess people probably still
Yeah, again, I don't.
but it is a lot of information, and I'm glad
there's definitely a lot
we
of
do
info
the
there.
recording. Yeah.
So feel free to look at the recording. If you have questions, we can talk about it next week.
Yeah.
If there aren't any other questions, we can
Okay,
jump off.
Andy,
It's
yeah.
up to you.
Yeah. Okay, if anybody last chance, or maybe not relate to this scientist.
Yeah, any other question. It doesn't have to be this one. It could be any other topic.
I guess not.
Okay, great. Okay,
Well,
thank you
thank you
guys.
so much,
Talk to you next
Neil.
week. Yeah, you're
I'll
back.
see you next week.
Yeah, next week we're going to do the Bible. Is it true? Is it accurate? Okay,
All
thanks.
right. Take care. Bye-bye.